Hello everyone, I hope you are very happy and well and that you've enjoyed the sunshine today. One of the few people I know to be promoted after they had officially retired was my husband Peter, who spent the last few years of his formal working life teaching pupils with special educational needs. And on one occasion he came to help out at the school where I was the head teacher, because our regular special needs teacher had been taken ill. Now we had in the school a young girl called Ebony, and she was very black. She was an able girl socially, worldly wise and confident, but she had literacy problems. And so we employed a special needs teacher to come to some of her lessons to help her access them fully. And on one such occasion, it was a library lesson, and my husband was the teacher that was there to help her. Before the lesson began, while they were getting their papers and things together, Ebony told Peter, in a very cheerful way, that she was very happy because her cousin, Letitia, had joined the school. And she and Letitia were good friends, and so it was very nice that they were now pupils together. Just at that moment, a class of young girls came out of the school changing rooms and ran past the library window on their way to their lesson on the playing field. And Ebony said with great excitement, "Oh, look, there's Letitia." And my husband looked up and said innocently, "Which one?" Whereupon Ebony gave Peter a somewhat withering glance and said, "Oh, come on, sir, the black one." Most of this part of my talk is going to be snippets, one-liners you might say, but I'm going to tell you a few stories which are a bit longer than that. Some girls are middle-aged from a very early age, and that's a very useful thing. They are the people who make sure things work smoothly, who are organised and who like organising and, dare I say, mothering other people. And my school had a share of those. A date in my diary was causing a problem because the district had had a new area education officer who had booked an appointment to come and see me for an introduction to the school. It was also a regular event that we should once a year have the saga of the school photographs. And my gosh, saga it was. And the photographer wished to come on the same day as the area education officer. And for a while, I thought I was going to have to cancel one or the other. And then it occurred to me I could use a group of my pupils to put together all of the official business for the school photographs. And I gathered together a group of earnest young women to do just that. They set up a booth for the photographer. They produced endless lists of which class was going to come at what time and which teacher was going to supervise them and where siblings were going to have photographs together even though they weren't in the same year, how that was going to be arranged, etc., etc. And they discussed it all with me and it all seemed scrupulously planned. On the day, I sat in my office hoping that the school photographs were going smoothly and waiting for the area education officer. Until, worried that nothing was happening, I thought I'd better go on a recce. So I went to my secretary and I said, "Has the education officer arrived?" And she said, "Not to my knowledge, madam." "Oh dear," I said. "Well, if he comes while I'm not in my office, tell him I'm just checking on the arrangements for the school photographs." I go down to the quiet bit at the back of the school hall where the photographer was to have his booth, and All seemed to be under control, and one of the senior girls came and said to me, "Madam, we're all ready, but I'm a bit worried because the photographer doesn't seem very clear about what he's going to be doing, and what's more, he doesn't seem to have any equipment." So I go up to the gentleman concerned and greet him happily and say, "Everything under control?" And he waves at me a sheaf of papers and says, "Your girls have provided me with all this, and I've no idea what they're on about, and they won't let me get a word in sideways." And I then said, "Excuse me, you are the school photographer, aren't you?" And he said, "School photographer? Rubbish. I'm the new education officer." You can't win them all, can you? I am pleased to say that as the day wore on, the photographer did arrive, the photographs turned out fine, and the education officer went away with quite a positive impression about how well my senior girls could organise something. Exams. Secondary schools, even before league tables, were always preoccupied and dominated by exams. And exams brought with them their own set of problems. Public exams particularly. In this day where we're all having to socially isolate, etc., having a metre apart is a new bit of legislation, but it was the legislation for examination desks all those years ago. And I had an exam officer, a splendid gentleman, and you could always tell his state of mind by how vertical his hair was, because as he got more agitated, if something was going wrong, he would run his fingers through his hair until his hair stood up quite vertically. In the fullness of time, an exam appeared on the curriculum, which was computer studies. Nobody, I think, does that as a separate subject anymore. Using a computer is part of the modus operandi of everybody's life. And the computer studies exam was, thanks to somebody's wisdom, set to be on the same day as the main maths exam for all of the examination year group. And so we required, in the entrance hall and the main school hall, which linked with each other, to have 90 desks for the maths exam and 9 desks for the computer studies group. I several times, I'm sorry to say, said to my exam officer, "Don't forget the extra 9 desks on the day of the maths exam." Unbeknownst to me, the head of maths had also said, "Don't forget the extra 9 desks on the day of the maths exam." And the chap who taught computer studies had said, "Don't forget I need 9 desks for the computer studies exam." Come the day, and all the pupils are closeted behind closed doors, waiting for the moment when they can go in and sit down and start to open and read their papers. Everyone's nervous, huge number of people, somewhat agitated. The doors to the main hall were thrown open, and there, in splendid, isolated glory in the vast room, were 9 desks. The exam officer had not forgotten the 9 desks. He'd been reminded so many times. He had forgotten the 90. If you've ever seen pictures of worker ants, you would get the impression of what happened when 90 exam desks, or any other desks that were around, had to be gathered, set out, measured with seats in a very limited amount of time. The papers had to be opened within 30 minutes of the exam room being available. Both exams did go ahead, and I thought my deputy head was going to take off because his hair was so very vertical. There was also an occasion when one of my pupils was ill in hospital, long-term ill in hospital, and it was arranged that he would do his examination in the hospital ward, and I was going to take the exam papers, still sealed, from the school to the hospital, where the sister in charge of the ward would be there to receive them. The hospital in question is vast, and the ability to park there is almost nil. It is a horror story rather than a legend in its lifetime. I get there, I drive round and round, and although I knew where the ward was and which door I should go into, parking anywhere near was impossible, partly because the area immediately outside the convenient door was a building site where additional building work was going on. I parked my car. I leant over and took from my back seat a clipboard and a hard hat. They were both there because of work that I had been doing in the theatre, and when you're putting up scenery, often it is regulations that you wear a hard hat. I clipped the exam papers to the clipboard, I put on the hard hat, I brazenly walked past the workmen, wishing them a good morning and hoping their day was going to go well. I went up to the ward, I delivered the exam papers, I came back, I gave a similar greeting to the workman who cheerfully said cheerio to me. I got back in my car and I drove off. Bluff is sometimes a wonderful thing. And talking of the theatre, how about this one? Taking a whole year group dance practice in the school hall prior to pupils being chosen to be in the next school production. I wasn't going to be directing the production, but I had volunteered to help in this way. And I was teaching the children a step, which meant that you went step, close, step, stamp, step, close, step, stamp. But I said, enthusiastically, step, close, step, bonk, step, close, step, bonk, step, close, step. And one of my Asian boys tapped me on the shoulder and said very graciously, "Excuse me, madam, if I were you, I would say step, stamp, rather than step, bonk. I will explain later." Who says that the age of gallantry is dead? I'm going to leave the last word with someone you will have heard of. I was at a conference. It was in the middle of the summer, but the air conditioning had been on so powerfully that although the men in the room might have been fairly comfortable, women in summer dresses were frozen. It was very near lunchtime, and my middle was beginning to rumble, and I admit that I had allowed my attention to wander. One of the people at the meeting was our former Prime Minister, Tony Blair. And when he was making his concluding remarks, he said to all and sundry, "Well, I have to say, I agree with Jean Gemmell." I sent up a silent prayer. Please don't let him ask me to amplify. I had no idea then, and I have no idea now, what he was talking about. I'm not sure I ever agreed with Tony Blair. Thank you so much for listening to me. Bye-bye.